Good evening, members of the public here this evening, and a very warm welcome in particular to those members of the public who are watching this meeting online. Okay, before we get on with the agenda, I'd just like to ask our Democratic Services Officer, Bob Hampton, if he could read some messages regarding the administration of the meeting this evening. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Please note that this meeting of the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being recorded by the Council and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Any councillors or officers not in the room and wishing to speak, please use the raise your hand feature and switch on your video when invited to speak. Please could members in the room only speak when invited to by the chair and mute their microphone when not speaking. And finally, please ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 1, apologies. We do have some apologies, and I'll go through them. We've got apologies from Councillor Bobby Dove, Councillor Oliver Walters, Councillor Kate Salmon, and Councillor Leslie Dedman. Agenda item 2, substitute members. We have Councillor Chapman Law for Councillor Walters, Councillor Armstrong for Councillor Salmon, and Councillor Adams for Councillor Bobby Dove. We do not have a substitute for Councillor Leslie Dedman. Thank you.
Chairman, can I just also add that Councillor Trent is expected, but hasn't arrived. Maybe the weather's delaying him, I don't know.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any item on the agenda? No, we do not seem to have. Okay, agenda item 4, minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask the committee to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of June 2023? Happy to? Anyone consent? Okay, take those as approved. Thank you. Agenda item 5, public issues. We do have one question from Mr. Alec McKinstry, and we have one public statement received from Ms. Gail Mayhew, who is the MD of Future Places Limited. Mr. McKinstry, could I invite you up to the table to ask your question, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Is this the correct seat, first of all, Chair? Is the correct seat?
I think that one will do admirably.
Okay. I literally just got here. So, okay, question. With regard to option H in tonight's draft report, disposal of the former civic offices in Poole and Christchurch, I'm assuming the estates team has already weighed up the pros and cons of letting out either of these sites, while the council retains the freehold ownership. If so, can we have a detailed summary of the potential merits and drawbacks of such a letting? In addition, can you confirm if a report already exists on the pros and cons of letting out these sites, as it may be the case that councillors would like to see such a report, along with any supporting documents such as structural surveys or details of any recent maintenance spends, prior to the Cabinet meeting of the 27th of September, or indeed prior to the full council meeting of the 5th of October.
Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. And we have the Leader of the Council here this evening, who's going to answer your question. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Chair. Cabinet and Council will be provided with a copy of the outline business case as produced by BCP Future Places Limited, with a covering statement from the estates team to reflect the new recommendation in recognition of the change in circumstances. Ahead of any disposal, the estates team will carry out a process of due diligence to ensure that the council achieves best consideration for these sites. This includes whether a long leasehold should be sold or whether the site should be broken down into smaller plots. At this time, no report exists on the pros and cons of letting out these sites on a long leasehold basis, but it will do so before detailed decisions are taken.
Okay, thanks both of you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, Mr. McKinstry. Which now brings us to the public statement by Gail Mayhew, MD Future Places Limited. And she's not here this evening, but she has asked if our legal officer could read out the statement. So I would ask Mr. Hampton to read it, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the public statement submitted by Gail Mayhew. I'm extremely proud of the work that Future Places has done in raising the aspirations for regeneration and placemaking in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. This work has attracted interest from national, public and private investors alike. I recognise that the ongoing financial situation of the Council requires a different solution. BCP Future Places has played a part in setting a new agenda and proposed structures for placemaking and high quality development delivery, which may be taken forward positively by the Council as it takes over the lead role on key sites such as Holes Bay and the Big. Future Places' drive has been to deliver the highest quality development for communities and people in BCP. It is therefore regrettable that the DLUHC report raised questions around governance which may have been wrongly interpreted as attaching to the Future Places team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Which now brings us to the main agenda item of this evening. Agenda item 6, the future of BCP Future Places Limited, investment and development. Now, clearly this is a very important agenda item. It's been in the press and it's a key topic for the council to deal with. And to reflect that, we do have our senior team here this evening to present the paper. We have Councillor Vicky Slade, leader of the council. We have the other senior officers for this evening. We have no less the Chief Executive, Graham Ferrand. Welcome. Jess Gibbons, our Chief Operations Officer. Adam Richards, our Director of Finance and Section 151 Officer. Is Sarah Good here? Not sure. Sarah, no, okay. Also, we do have, and I believe they're online, representing Future Places Limited is Premier Fahmy, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, who is the Interim Chair of Future Places Board, and also accompanied by Patrick Hayes, who is also a member of the Future Places Board of Directors. Just one other thing before we start, just to flag up that an additional note has been forwarded to members about an appendix on an agenda item coming up to Cabinet on the 27th, which does contain financial information regarding some of the sites that we'll be discussing later on. I just wanted to just a word of caution that if you want to talk about the commercial aspects contained in that confidential paper, that we will have to go into closed session and exclude the public, I'm afraid, stop the live stream and hold the debate in just within the committee. So just to be warned about that. So having said that, did I introduce you, Susan? I don't think I did. I missed you out. I do apologise. You're hiding around the corner. But we also have Susan Zeiss, our Director of Law and Governance, here this evening as well. So thank you for that. Okay, with those introductions over with, I will now ask the Leader of the Council, Vicky Slade, if she would introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What I don't intend to do in introducing the paper is to go through all the detailed contents of the paper. I'm hoping that everyone has read that, because it's been a major topic in the public domain for a long time. What I do want to do is to clarify the purpose of this paper and what I see as the purpose of the scrutiny. But before I do that, I just want to put on record the fact that whatever comments might come forward about the decision to recommend, or that the officer's decision to come forward and recommend to us that we close down Future Places, that is by no means a commentary on the hard work and quality of the work that's been carried out by the staff who work in that organisation. This is a really difficult time for them, as it is and could be for any member part of the organisation, that difficult decisions have to be made about going forward. And I think that's a really important thing to say. So this is about the decision of the council to progress its work around regeneration in a way that is more fitting to the direction of travel for the new council, that recognises the remaining ambition of the council to deliver for our residents really good quality homes and places, in a changed environment, both economically and politically. So that's sort of the sort of starting point, really. Inevitably, there will be, I'm sure, some picking over of the approach that's been taken by Future Places over the time that it's been in existence. I do just want to make it very clear that the chair and the other non-exec director that are online were not in place until a few months ago, and that Karima very kindly agreed to step up as the chair after the sad death of Bob Kerslake. So that they have helped us enormously in coming to this decision. In terms of the situation, Future Places, as you know, was set up a couple of years ago as the urban regeneration company for the council, with a remit and a set of governance to achieve regeneration and placemaking. During its short time, that framework has changed and the governance model has changed, and it has become obvious that at the time that we took control of the council, the amount of the working capital loan that the organisation had with which to do its work was going to run out, and that very quickly we would have to find a way to recapitalise the organisation to make sure that it had enough money to deliver on its priorities. What also became obvious was that the scope and scale of the organisation had expanded exponentially over the last year or so, so that the areas of work that the council wanted to prioritise was being lost amongst a lot of other pieces of work. And therefore, the work that we had asked to be done was, what would happen if we contract the organisation to focus on a few key areas, and we look at how that could be operated? What are our options? We worked from the beginning of June through the management team of Future Places, through the non-exec directors, through the council's leadership, to come up with a series of options. We had very detailed meetings with all concerned, and lots of detailed financial assessments done about what would happen if different things were to follow. And what became clear was that, based upon a slimmed down version of 4 or 5 projects, which were the priorities of the council, the organisation would not be viable going forward. The additional financial situation, where borrowing is now extremely expensive, the council's contracting financial situation, where borrowing money on a hope that something will come forward was no longer a risk that we could take, has led us to believe that in order to deliver regeneration at pace, we should bring the function inside the council. We did look at an alternative financial model for Future Places. We tried to. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to a point where an alternative was viable. We also considered the option of stopping any regeneration function going forward, and that was seen as being not in the best interests of the council, because Holmes Bay was bought for a reason. On the 30th of September 2020, we were really proud to take ownership of Holmes Bay. A lot of work has been done on that site in the last 3 years, most of it invisible. and there will be some that say that, you know, we're cutting its legs off just at the point it's about to deliver. But actually, we need to start delivering across that site and a number of others. So to stop doing regeneration would utterly undermine our ability to provide homes for the future. And that's why we are officers are recommending to Cabinet that we go forward with option one, which I completely support. I'm really pleased that Gail has made a really fair statement about the work that they've done and being part of delivering. And it is true to say that a lot of the work that's been done in areas which are not going to go forward right now have huge value. At some point in the future, when that work is done, we will be able to use that work. But right now, we don't have a use for all of that work, and therefore it's the right thing to bring it inside the council. But I will be relying quite heavily on Graham and Jess in terms of some of the technical pieces. Obviously, they've been on this journey throughout. I've picked it up since May, and Mark is here as well if there's anything specific on the sites. Mark has been working on the specific site-based regeneration projects, but yeah, happy to take any questions at all.
Okay, thank you. Oh, good evening, Councillor Trent. Hi, please come in. Leader, one of the things you haven't mentioned are the options.
That haven't referenced the sale of the assets. Did you want me to cover that as well? Yes. So the future of Future Places itself is actually a cabinet decision to go forward and make these decisions in accordance with various senior officers. The area that does require full council's approval is the disposal of the two civic centres, and this is the reason that we put an additional council meeting in for October, was so that we would not lose any time in taking that to the next council meeting that was planned for November. What's really clear is that at this time, the proposals that were on the table to develop the civic offices as hotels is not something that we feel the council should be taking a risk on, particularly one which a very significant size risk. We also have a need to deliver some capital into the council, and that's why the best option that we feel to go forward is to dispose of those offices through the correct process. We will be inviting people to come forward with their suggestions for how they would like to purchase them. We will look at the option of retaining them and giving them with a lease. Some of us recall sale of sites in Poole which were being sold for one purpose and then used for another. So we will be doing our best to make sure that they're sold for the reasons the council would want. But it is fairly clear that the council should not be delivering those as within its regeneration function, that there are other options for those, and that's why we're recommending them both for sale. There was a meeting in March, full council, where previous administration was wanting to take them forward for hotels, and that fell, and there's no appetite to continue that piece of work right now.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Now, before I open up discussion, I'd like to suggest that although obviously the disposal of the assets is related to Future Places work, that we actually deal with them slightly separately. So we go through the Future Places issues and the recommendations that are in the report, and having concluded the discussion on that, we then go on to the disposal of the assets. If you're okay with that, members, yeah, okay. With that, then I think what we'll do is open the discussion and ask members to come forward with any questions they may have. Councillor Darling, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I should have probably declared an interest or a potential conflict. I don't think there is one, but my current employer, I work for a construction consultancy that do offer advisory services similar to that of Future Places to local authorities. I don't actually work in that department, but to the best of my knowledge, we aren't actually currently working with BCP Council. But I do have an interest with my current employer, a potential conflict, but I don't think we're currently working with BCP. So, planning to.
Thank you. Councillor Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, well, one of my main concerns about all this is actually for the staff at Future Places. They've obviously, they're aware of the decisions in this paper and the scrutiny and going to cabinet and everything. And of course, they are protected by lots of HR legislation. And I hope that many will want to 2P across, as the council clearly needs their expertise. Personally, I don't like putting anyone in this situation, but as the leader has just outlined, many things have changed since Future Places was first set up. And of course, there is also the really urgent need to deliver social and affordable housing on key sites. And I do appreciate this is a tricky situation for everyone, but especially Future Places staff involved. And can I ask how things are going with the staff? Thank you.
Do you want to take that, Leader?
If it's okay, I'll start and then I won't pass to Jess. So myself, Jess, and a member of HR attended a meeting with all of the Future Places staff on Monday in their offices. It was a very difficult and upsetting meeting for people, as it always will be when people's futures are being considered. There will be people who work for that organisation who will be, really unhappy about the idea of working for a local authority. There may be others who will be pleased to be able to continue with the work that they've been carrying on. Some of the staff that are working for Future Places are obviously working on the projects, and that's quite an easy thing to do in terms of bringing them into a new function. Some of them will be working in the sort of back office, so within their administrative function or their finance function, and we've made it really clear that all of them will have a job with BCP on their existing terms as per GP. And I know that it wasn't the first meeting that Jess has been to, and I'm sure it won't be the last. But that is really key, and we did stress to them then, as we stressed when we did our interviews last week with the media, that whatever might be said about the direction of travel, the quality of the work that they've been undertaking is of really good value. It's a really good quality and is of value. I think I described it as, some of the work might be considered that you might have a really great car, but right now we don't have a driving license, and so the car might be great and it might be really valuable, but actually we can't drive it right now. So we need to make the most of the work that we can do, and the work that we can't needs to be wrapped up in a way that it can be used later on. But I'll pass over to Jess.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. I think absolutely recognising the difficult time this is for staff is so valuable. So thank you for asking that, and thank you to Vicky for joining me this week at a meeting. Graham joined me at an earlier meeting, and I've had a meeting with staff of my own. So I've been meeting with them regularly. We've also got Future Places staff working with us internally. So their HR person has been really good at coordinating and make sure we're regularly communicating, and our comms team are making sure we're doing that regular internal communication to offer them the support through this process. We're not, obviously, a decision hasn't yet been made. That's caused anxiety in terms of won't it happen, and we want to make sure we're supporting them as much as possible, and have given them access to the wellbeing offers that the council has, so that they can have that support. In terms of people coming across, we've absolutely committed that those project staff, the enabling teams, as Vicky has said, we absolutely want all of that knowledge and skill to come into the organisation. But we also recognise that some of them, as Vicky's just said, may not want to come. So obviously it's the best. We want to make sure that people have the best decisions for them, but also that help us deliver on the projects we need to deliver.
Thank you. Okay. I'm really pleased that this question has come up first, really, because, you know, when we talk about all the figures, of course, it's the human aspect behind it and the concerns from people whose livelihoods are affected by these issues. So it's, you know, I'm really, you know, glad that that issue has been tabled initially. And before I ask our next councillor to speak, I just wondered if Karima Farmi, if I got that right. Karina, is there anything you'd like to add to what's been said?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would actually like to add my thanks for the question being raised, because, as has been said, it is a really, really important factor, and it is incredibly difficult for the team at the moment, particularly, you know, with certain press commentary, which is very unhelpful and at times very hurtful for the team. And I think it is very, very important that we all keep in mind that there is a clear distinction between the decision to wrap up the entity as an entity, and that has no reflection at all on the quality and the caliber of the people within that entity, which is an entirely different point. So yes, so thank you very much for raising that.
Sorry, thank you. Have you finished? Sorry, I was just distracted for a second there. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It's a bit of a continuation on that theme. I've got a number of questions, as you might expect, about parts in the paper, but I'll try and keep to different themes, if that may help. And the first one I want to talk about is the principle of the decision itself. I think there's some serious questions about the financial impacts, which I think I'll go on to a little bit later. But just in terms of the principle, colleagues that know me will know that I could talk about regeneration until the end of the world, particularly why Future Places was created and the aims behind it around placemaking, getting regeneration going. I think the report's very fair in that summary, and indeed we seem to have a general consensus that this is not a criticism, as we've just heard from the chair and from the leader, of the performance of Future Places itself. It was, in the leader's words, around a new function which is more fitting, in her words, to the direction of travel for the new administration. And it's absolutely within the gift of any administration to decide how they want to do any function. The question I have is why is the in-house model better? And we don't have a business plan for that here. We have a lot in the paper which talks about the background of Future Places and issues around that, but very little around why this would be better in-house. Now, it has been touted previously that the model is better because of a more refined focus on fewer projects, and the leader, I think, said, you know, looking at Future Places going forward, if you only wanted to do 4 or 5 projects, it would make the entity unviable. But actually, in this paper, despite all of that rhetoric, the amount of projects that it looks like on table 12.1 the council is intending to carry on with is actually 12. There's actually only two of the major projects that the decision is taken to stop. Not counting the sale of the 2 civic centres, nearly all of the other projects are continuing, but continuing in-house. Now, as I said, that's entirely within the gift of the administration, but why, you know, in more detailed terms, do we think that this model is better? Is a question I would like to ask. It is very, very linked to what I'll talk about in a little while, which is the financial situation, the financial impacts of decision, and the reason that we actually created the financial model for Future Places. But I'd just like to start from the principle. Why is in-house better?
Thank you. Very reasonable and valid question, I think. Councillor Broadhead, leader.
Yeah, so I'm going to come back initially on the main reasons. Some of the commentary about, them continuing is actually there's principles about them continuing in the future, but not straight away. So I think that that's not quite accurate in terms of the ones that are continuing. So the real issues around why an in-house model is better is partly around governance, it's partly around control, it's partly around spend. Um, the model that has been operating through Future Places has meant that the costs of some items have been trebled, which we know is a normal model in the private sector. But for example, if we commission a report as the council, the report has a value. We go and pay an ecologist a price. What we've been seeing through Future Places is that that would be a report that would be commissioned, and then the cost back to the council is considerably more because there has to be a value to the Future Places model, and so we're not actually paying directly for those things, whereas an in-house model would go off and get an ecology report and we pay for the ecology report. So there's a huge amount of added cost which enabled the functions of Future Places meant that in order to be able to do some of the things that Future Places were doing, which were not directly going to result in a capital project, they had to cover their costs somehow. And the way you do that is to increase your sort of model of what you spend across the board. Something like the charrette in Westover Road, which would be part of a future Bournemouth Arc project to look at the entertainment arc in Bournemouth. The costs of that were quite significant, but there's nothing to show for it at the end. There might be a few years down the line, but not yet. And so that has to be bundled up somewhere. So that ability to say, well, actually, we're only going to pay for the stuff that we actually want to deliver. The other issue that happened quite significantly over the last, particularly the last year or so since the business model changed, others will come on to explain how the business model changed from its original inception to where we are now, is the ability to have direct control of what the organisation does. The level of control within Future Places has been quite light, and the officers haven't actually been able to say, hang on, we just want you to do X. So getting the control back and the governance around this is a council function spending public money, and therefore it should be subject to the same rules and not an arm's length situation where it functions more as a private company but funded by the public. That whole principle is something which just was getting to the point where it just wasn't working. If I can bring Graham in and more specifically about that benefit.
Okay, Jeremy, I'm happy to talk about the essence of control, which the current agenda is a smaller number of projects. It is focusing on delivering the core projects, the key projects like Holes Bay, the Bournemouth International Centre. When you look at the list of projects, a number of the projects that were being developed, I'll take the example of Paul Civic Centre to be developed as a hotel, put huge risk on the council, puts a huge investment requirement on the council. And the council will then take in the risk of developing a hotel, and effectively that work could be done, or we could find a simpler solution to it. And the essence of this report is saying actually on those projects we're going to find simpler solutions. Therefore the capacity that we need is much smaller, and we therefore need to focus that capacity on the core projects. Delivering on Holes Bay is a key one. One of the examples I have used, and I'll use again, is that if Future Places had only focused on Holes Bay and no other projects, Holes Bay would be more advanced today than it is. That's absolutely true, because if you focus entirely on a project, you spend all your time doing it, you'll move it forward more quickly. The agenda here is to deliver the core projects. The way to get the control on this way is to run it in-house, because through an arm's length company, we have points of control. The annual business plan agreement, yes, we have control on that because that comes to Cabinet and Council for approval. But in between, we have influence. not control. And this is really about saying, right, we want to deliver the core projects that we want to deliver. We want to be really clear about what they are. We want to get the resources in to do that and really focus on delivery for local communities. And actually, the way to do that is to have it in house. The model was perfectly fine model. It was a good model in an expansion time and a time when you could afford to potentially look at a number of issues and not bring forward delivery. The focus is bring forward delivery on those core projects. The way to do that is to maintain control. And frankly, what I think the paper does is it tries to set the way that we're going to do that in the future, rather than trying to look at the past and saying this is what was wrong with the model, because the model actually is a good model. We've seen it work elsewhere in the country, but for right now, for the focus and control, that's the reason that we're recommending that we bring it in house.
Yes.
I was just going to follow up if that's okay. And just adding to what Graham and Vicky have helpfully said, and absolutely just picking up on the point Graham was making about this is about now and what we need to do going forward to meet this, sustainable housing need of our communities. And by bringing it in house, it gives us the opportunity to bring our housing delivery team into the same directorate, our commissioning team into the same directorate. So you have the Boscombe Towns Fund, you have all of our housing delivery projects, and you have the projects that were in the table in the report together, and those teams actually would have much more integration of the working, much more sharing of knowledge, much more joined up working when we're talking to people like Homes England and other partners about how we take these things forward, and that real focus. So that's sort of looking forward, that's what we think we'll be able to do.
Thank you, Leader.
Yeah, if I could just come back, because I've had a look at this list, because I think it's important that for anyone watching, they sort of say, well, hang on a minute, there are 12 continuing. I think it depends how you portray that. If you want to say that continue under a direct delivery model to be agreed by Cabinet is continuing, well, it's not, is it? What we're actually doing here is we are prioritising item 6, Paul Dolphin Leisure Centre, item 7, A, C and D, which is one site, Holes Bay. They are our priority delivery projects. And then the Bick Winter Gardens is something which we are delivering as a bigger scheme. But if you look across the others, reassess options under a direct delivery model, that doesn't mean we're continuing with it. That means that it's right that we actually say, what should we do? What is the right option? There are actually 3 projects there that we're going to take forward as a priority. The others either say the completed work will be passed to a team, stop, pause, reassess, or sell. So I don't think it's fair or correct to say that there are 12 that are continuing. I think that's a distortion of the facts.
Thank you, Leader. Did you want to carry on, Councillor Broadhead?
With your discretion, Chair, just because I think this next one is related, and look, I accept a lot of that. I do think there's much that we could probably disagree about in terms of things like the level of control that was evident under Future Places. I don't see it in quite that same way as the then portfolio holder at the time. The model was around, I mean, as with any council-owned company, and we have a number of council-owned companies such as Seascape Homes and Property Limited, BBML, a number of others. And I think it's as much around making sure that the relationship is right. We had a commissioning model which was very defined in terms of what the council was expecting Future Places to go out and do. I think what we're seeing is a change in direction for the new administration. So it's less of a criticism of Future Places, if you like, running off and doing things that they weren't supposed to, and more the fact that the administration see things very differently going forward, which is completely understandable. I haven't heard a tremendous amount more, however, around why the in-house model is better, other than we've got more control. And I think that's particularly relevant when we come to the finances. Again, I'm not going to go into long detail, but Lydia has mentioned a change that happened shortly after Future Places' inception for its financial model, which was based very much on other well-trialed council-owned companies such as Be First, which essentially enabled pretty much the full costs of the work of Future Places if connected to a project, of which nearly everything that they did was. There were a few exceptions, as we've heard, Westover Road, but that was actually the administration that instigated that work. That wasn't Future Places running off and doing it on their own. And the benefit of the capitalisation model was, and it's very clear in the paper, that the council would give the company a working capital loan. The projects that were commissioned as part of the commissioning plan would be taken forward to a point which was capitalisable, which we agreed with the outline business case. And at that point, we could essentially repay Future Places because that work would be capitalised. And the benefit of that was that by the last budget, we didn't need a revenue budget for regeneration anymore. Because so long as we were, had kind of confidence in seeing those projects through, then there wasn't a revenue implication. The issue with the in-house model is it is tremendously more difficult, if not almost impossible, with some exceptions towards the end of the project, to capitalise the spend, and that is actually, it's acknowledged in the paper by the fact that the decision incurs an additional cost this year to create a new regeneration function of 636,000, an additional regeneration budget of 1.526 million. So going back to the difference between the in-house model and the Future Places model, and we've talked a lot about the financial sustainability of the council, it's actually pretty clear that a in-house model has a higher burden on the revenue budget than an external model. So I think that's one thing. I'll ask for your comment on that in a moment. But just to keep on with the finances, and I think this is a really important point. Under the financial implications of this, it lays pretty clear what the financial implications are to the council's revenue budget of this decision. So this decision in total will cost, and it's pretty clear in the report, the £4 million that has already been put aside against Future Places from last year's surplus. So that's already in a pot of money already ready and waiting. An extra £1.2 million for estimated cost of closing Future Places, alongside £600,000 of revenue costs this year and 1.5 revenue costs next year. In total, that is just over £7 million, all of which is from the revenue account. Now, we hear from the administration all the time of the £44 million revenue gap next year. I know that, I feel that. We had £43 million gap last year. We had £40 million the year before. It's come through the territory of running a local authority, but it's precisely the reason why we moved to a capitalisation model rather than focusing on having to put the strain on the revenue account in-house. So I'd just like some commentary from the leader and others. First of all, do you recognise that that there will be a significant revenue cost of bringing it in-house, the model itself, but also, do you think it's acceptable that you're spending £7 million that you perhaps don't need to spend in very difficult times?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I think the first point, before I just clarify what was said then, the first point is it's more difficult to capitalise projects when it's being done internally rather than through an externally organised company. The second thing was that the revenue costs will be higher. And then I think the third point was the actual cost of making this decision and the effect that will have on the revenue budget. I think that's about the three main points, isn't it, Phil?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry for rattling on, but I do think it's important because £7 million is a lot of money.
No, absolutely, yeah. Okay, so Leader, did you want to kick off with that one?
Yeah, I will, and then I'm going to pass to Adam because he's obviously the guru when it comes to finances. But I noted a comment that we didn't need a revenue to fund this as long as we had confidence the project would deliver. Well, I think that's part of the problem. The lack of confidence that most of these projects would deliver, because the suggestion that Poole Civic Centre could deliver a high-class hotel in the middle of a roundabout where you required £600 a night room rate to make any money, and a £45 million risk to the council is evidence that we didn't have confidence that that project would deliver. So I think the fundamentals are that if there was confidence that the projects would deliver within a reasonable amount of time, then you could actually set aside that capital. But there's no evidence that some of these would actually make any money. The other difficulty is that you can only capitalise it at the point when the outline business case narrows you down to one option, and obviously the options are not options that would be reasonable, such as the hotel option. So there's that question about the fundamental idea that there's a lot of money being spent, £4.75 million already drawn down from that £8 million, and rising month on month, because it's a very large monthly cost to this organisation as it is now, that it would only be a matter of months before that £8 million ceiling was hit, unless we accepted an outline business case, and for example the hotel option, and we're then able to recapitalise some of that money. So that money's only going to go down when we say, okay, all right, we accept that, we'll go forward with it. But if what's coming forward is something you can't deliver, then that debt just keeps going up. So the alternative of carrying on would have become that we're going to renege on the deal soon enough, or have to increase from 8 million going upwards. In terms of the 4 million, that money was set aside at the beginning, earlier on this year, to basically allow us to have that headroom. So it isn't new money, it's money that's already been factored in. And yeah, absolutely, we accept that there are costs of bringing an organisation inside, because we have a responsibility to pay our dues. So what we could do is we could walk away and say, we don't value any of this work, we're not going to pay for it, it's not what we want. But what we are doing is we're doing the right thing by the work that's been done. We're setting a value against it. We're putting that into a space that says, yes, we're going to pay for it. Some of it will be able to be recapitalised when those sales go through. But yeah, there is a cost. We accept that completely, but a lot of it's already in the system, which Adam is going to explain because he's done it already.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. So, in regards to some of the points made, I suppose my comment would be, first of all, to refer members to table 30.1 that's in section 52, because I think the member read out the maximum column, clearly set out. It's like that is the minimum column, and we'll be looking and doing everything that we can to try and bring it towards the minimum rather than the maximum with regards to potential outcomes. I would also like to highlight and draw members' attention to section 55 of the report that makes it absolutely clear that with regards to the future cost of the investment and development team, we will be looking at capitalisation opportunities to try and reduce that overall annual cost of £1.526 million with regards to its strain on the revenue budget of the council. I suppose my other comment is probably just to pick up some of the things that the leader said with regards to the position of future places, in the sense that we know that they have currently drawn down £4.75 million of an £8 million loan. That is at this point in time. We know that their business plan for 23-24 was premised on spending £7.5 million worth of expenditure. So clearly, there would be a reliance on the council, if like, supporting the outline business cases that they actually put forward within that time period. The truth of the position is actually, what we've seen in March was they put forward two business cases, one for Christchurch Civic Centre, one for Paul Civic Centre, that would involve the council taking risks with just over £70 million of council taxpayers' money. Clearly, those business cases indicated that the benefits of those schemes over a 50-year period, but what they also recognised that in the short term that there was a viability gap, and that there was pressure being placed on the medium-term financial plan if, when they got to full business case, that stage was confirmed. So I think it's right to reflect on the risks both to the council and to the company as part of this overall equation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. Now, I'm sure Councillor Porter will want to come back on some of that, but I'd like to give one or two of the other members a crack at the whip at the moment. So I think it was Councillor Christine.
Hello, Councillor Goodall, Parkstone. It's all right, don't worry. I'm new at this. I just wanted to clarify something, and as if you treat me as a new member who really doesn't know what he's talking about, that's fine. I will have will not be unpleasant for me. I just wanted to talk about something that or rather ask a question. In one place, it talks about future places value is held in its intellectual property value. And if I just may read what I read, the company seeks to protect its IP to protect its financial position. In practice, this means Future Places is minded to only release final reports to its customers on confirmation of payment for work. This runs counter to shareholder agreement, which enables the council to access any documentation on request. So can somebody tell me, what does this mean to the council? Is the council a customer? And if and when Future Places is brought into the council, will the intellectual rights revert to the council? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question, actually. Leader or chief exec, probably.
Can I just start? I'm
Yeah.
going to pass over to the chief exec, but what I would say is that we started having meetings in early June, and what has been incredibly difficult at those meetings is actually getting access to documents, and I found that really difficult as a council. That is effectively they are a wholly owned company, and therefore that information may be theirs personally in terms of their professional stuff, but I found that really difficult to process. Why can we not get to see those papers on a confidential basis? And that's something that we've been challenging regularly through meetings, but I think Graham will be able to go into the detail of perhaps why that might be.
Before you come in, chief exec, could I just, Karima, if you want to respond to any of this, please just, if you could just indicate on the Teams, put your hand up, and then we'll bring you in. Okay, so let me bring the chief exec in first, and if you want to come back, please say so. Thank you. Chief exec.
Thanks, Chair. I think this goes to the heart of the relationship and the issues and the challenges of having an arm's length company. We've talked about some of the benefits of being able to bring in some extra skills and having that flexibility. But part of the challenge is because it is a company, we have a relationship with it both as shareholder. We own the company. It's our company. It does what we want it to. That's the theory. We're also a customer. And of course, we pay them for outputs and outcomes. And the outputs and outcomes are very often in report form. And that report, that's where the intellectual property lies. So there's a real tension in there. And this has been an ongoing tension that I've observed the last 18 months about access to those documents and that information, either at draft stage or early stage, or when reports come in, or at final draft stage, and the need for the company to be able to invoice the council for that intellectual property effectively. And that is at the heart of one of the challenges. So we have had numerous occasions, and probably it did come to a head actually about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we were talking this through and saying, okay, if we're going to start transferring the projects across, if the cabinet does make that decision, we need early sight of the documents so we can work out where each project is. Because if we talk about on the funding, we've got to work out which ones we want to pay for and how much we want to pay for those, and we've got to do a valuation exercise. So all that's got to be done. That can only be done based on the work that's been completed. And at that point, of course, the executive team were very reluctant to hand over the work that's been completed, because there was not enough trust in the relationship for them to say, well, here's the information because we trust you to pay us for it. And I think that was a really good illustration of the complexity of having an arm's length company, which you control through your shareholder status and through the agreement of business plan, but you don't actually control where the documents are held, for example, because they're held on their servers or their computers. And that lack of transparency, if that were within the council, of course, I'd just say as chief executive, give it to X, Y, or Z. Now, actually, we have now reached the position where we have access to those documents. But there have been times historically when we thought that was slower than we would have wanted, significantly slower than we would have wanted. And actually, it was a matter that we discussed with the non-executive board and the executive board over the last few weeks. And actually was quite a strong point of contention. So we've put it into the report because it is a real point of tension. I think that could have been much more transparently handled. And actually, as shareholder, of course, we did build into the shareholder agreement a right to access all documents. But you don't really want to invoke the shareholder agreement formally at any point in a company that you own. So that was some of the tension that we've been going through. So I'm being quite open about that, because that is one of the reasons why I believe that for focused project delivery, in-house team would be much easier, because we control access to and the gateways to the information at all times. That is one of the disadvantages of having the arm's length relationship through the company structure. So, very openly, that's part of the issue. That's part of the challenge. That's one of the factors which I think would say, if you're going to deliver 2 or 3 projects, absolutely focused on those, then running them in-house would be a simpler way of managing it.
Thank you, John. I'm going to bring are you happy with that, Councillor Goodall? You see, Councillor Tarling, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got some very specific questions, and thankfully one councillor's already asked the same question, so thank you very much for the answer on that one. And I'm going to thank Councillor Broadhead for raising the issues and pointing out some very interesting facts about the capitalisation and the revenue stream for future places. I think it's worth noting that at the outset of future places, it wasn't clear to people on the outside where the money was coming from future places, and Councillor Broadhead has actually pointed out very clearly, as I understand it to be, and now I know, that it would be from future projects. So when the project is materialised or realised and the site is disposed of, that revenue comes back through future places, back into the business. However, back into the council, sorry. However, that is a case of kicking the proverbial money can down the road. We're talking obviously £8 million facility, of which 4.75 has been spent. Money that's gone out now to pay salaries on potential revenues, again at risk that they won't be realised or capitalised at some point down the future. So, as a risk profile, it is a riskier profile. Let me give you a bit of my background. I've written business cases for the Ministry of Defence, and the Treasury Green Book standard of writing business cases is something that I've been trained on, and I've written a fair few in my time. I requested a while ago that the business case, the outline business case for Christchurch Civic Centre, to have a look at the proposals there, and agree it's only an outline business case, but its maturity is not at a point where you would want to base a decision on it. Financially, it's based on some very loose figures, and therefore I do believe the previous council was right to obviously not progress any further with that OBC as it stood. With that in mind, I mean, there's a few things I wanted to know. Basically, I endorse the options put forward here. That I think the way our public sees it and the electors see it is that this is money that's going out at a point when we can't afford to spend more money on the promise, as Councillor Broadhead said, of this revenue coming in on the realisation of a project. And I think it's been made quite clear with the change in the climate, increasing costs, that the risk of those projects not performing, as the leader has just stated, one about the hotel option for Civic Centre. I'm not going to go into the figures of the OBC because, as I've just said, I don't trust the OBCs anyway until you've got a full costed financial breakdown, a full business case. It's not at a point of making a decision to go. The go no go on this would be a couple of years down the line, which means that you're not going to realise this revenue from the IP for another 5-6 years, which is well outside the risk. Just one other point. So I endorse that. So that's a statement. Apologies, I haven't got to the question yet. But there's one other thing on the actual closure. We've got some estimates here that are proposed of between 2.23 million and 1.24 million, which is a very large target as far as I'm concerned. There's quite a wide remit. I just ask, are we hoping at some point to get a more accurate figure of what those closed down costs would be that's noted in Part E of the recommendations. Thank you. That is my question.
Thank you, Councillor. There are a number of comments I could make on what some of the things you've just said, actually, but I'm going to hold back for a moment. And I think, yeah, I'm sure that we're all hoping that we're getting an accurate figure, and we certainly will when we spent the money, won't we? But Councillor Slade.
Adam's going to go into the detail, but fundamentally, and in layman's terms, and for the benefit of new councillors and old who find this really very complex, it's not just if you're brand new in the job. The difficulty that Graham referred to in being able to get hold of information means that we are not as far down the line as I would have liked to be. So we had started these very long conversations and meetings in June, and I became very frustrated, vocally frustrated, as did Graham, going into a meeting and having to say, but we asked for this information a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and so on. So where I think we are, in simple terms, is if the information that comes through shows that there is no value, then we have a worst case scenario. But actually, if the work that's been progressed can be packaged in a way that we go, oh my goodness, haven't you done this work? That's really great work. That's really relevant to what we want to do going forward. Then the amount we can pay for it and allocate to it is going to be bigger. So it is, I believe, a lack of getting to a point now of having enough information. But we had to make a decision to call time on this, because the amount of meetings we were going to and going, oh, this is going to get kicked down the road, kicked down the road, kicked down the road, that we've gone, no, we're going to actually just make a final decision on this in the right time, and we're going to ask you to give us the information by certain deadlines. And there certainly hasn't been enough information coming through because of the lack of access to information. But
Can I go first?
yeah,
Sure.
of course.
Just to paint the overview before I bring Adam in terms of the detail, what we've been trying to do is say to future places at this point, right, first of all, we need a project wrapper for each one. So wrap up each project and give us a paper that summarises what has been done, what's the cost, what's been incurred, what stage are you at to, what would be the recommended next steps, etc. So that we're really clear on where each project is. They're developing those project wrappers at the moment. As I said earlier, we do have access now to the structure reports that go below that, but we need that wrapped up. And then what we have to do is look at each of those projects and say which ones are currently capable of being capitalised. So best example is Holes Bay, former power station site. We have a capital budget open for that because we acquired it. So an amount of work will have been done on getting the studies and remediation strategies, etc. We ought to be able to get that, wrap it up, and probably capitalise that, hopefully, because we've got a capital project for that. There will be other examples where we look at it and say, well, actually, that's something which might support our strategic planning framework, the new local plan. There'll be some really good work around Lansdowne, for example, that we've got that would support the local plan. Now, if we've got that, then we may be able to value that. I'm just going to make up a number, so let's just put a number. If it's worth £100,000, we can say, okay, that's worth £100,000 towards our planning strategy. We can legitimately fund that bit of work. Now, what we're hoping, of course, is that when we look at all the work, all of that will add up to the amount of loan that's been drawn down, in which case there isn't an actual loss in wrapping up the company, because we will have identified value against the projects that have been done. Now, what we need to do is come back to you with the detail once we've done that work on every one of those projects, got a legitimate valuation of the work that's being carried out, a legitimate budget source to pay for that, some of which might be the provision. So we'd use the provision from last year to actually pay for valued works. If at the end of that, there's an amount of money which isn't covered by value which we can derive from the work, then that's the sort of the net loss in winding up the company. But that's the structure that we're now going through. And we aim to do that over the next couple of months. It will take a while because, for example, on the planning framework, we have to get the planners to say, yes, that will help to contribute towards the local plan. And yes, that price that was paid for it was a legitimate value. Now, of course, the planners don't necessarily have that as a budget, so we need to then find the budget corporately. But that's why Adam's given you that balancing figure. So what my aim would be to make the financial cost of winding up the company as low as possible, because we have legitimately paid value for the works that have been carried out. Yeah, but I can't tell you what that number is yet till we've gone through that exercise. The frustration that the leader feels and that I also feel is I was hoping we would today be in a position to have those numbers before we brought it to the cabinet. Actually, we're not, and we're not going to be in that position probably now for about a couple of months. And that's been the delay of sharing. And that, unfortunately, leads to headlines because people look at the maximum cost and that's the headline. And that's a real shame because there is more value in the work that Future Places have done than that would indicate. At that point, I've just run out of steam. I'm going to hand over to Adam if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not quite sure what I can really add to the points made by the Chief Exec and the leader, other than to maybe refer members to recommendation D of the report, because I think what that makes it clear is that we will endeavour to ensure that this is an open and transparent process. Once we've completed that due diligence exercise with those subject matter experts, we will bring that the consequences of all of that back to Cabinet, so that everybody be clear about what the final outcome would be. And as part of that recommendation D, there is looking for agreement in regards to Appendix 3, which is a set of principles. And those principles will help us with regards to the valuation of the work and what we do and do not pay in regards to that work in progress.
Thank you. Before I bring other members in, Karima, is there anything you would like to comment on? I sort of invited you a little while ago, and I'm sorry if I haven't forgotten about you.
That's very kind. Thank you, Chair. And I'll also just bring in my colleague Pat Hayes as well for any comments he might have. I mean, I think that the process that the Chief Exec has outlined is the process that needs to be gone through. There does need to be, evaluation of all the work done. I believe all the information has been shared, so it's a matter of just working through that now and making sure that the right values are attributed to the right pieces of work. Pat, I don't know if there's anything you would want to add on that as well.
No, I mean, the only thing I suppose I would say is I think that Graham's analysis of the possible relationship difficulties is, I think, very fair, because certainly having run arm's length companies myself in other authorities, the degree of informal sharing, so we say, was much greater than possibly has occurred through the way that Future Places has been structured, and that has created a problem, as just indicated, in terms of knowing the value of work done and settling final payment and things like that. So I think that I tend to concur with Graham's view around the relationship issues.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair.
You're okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I have a couple of few questions. So I think actually my first question has already been answered, and what I understand is that the intellectual property it just belongs to us. So that's fine. So that's great. That one's answered already. There's also some talk in the report about us buying things from Future Places. I think equipment and things like that. And I just wanted to check, if we buy things from Future Places, surely we get that money back, don't we? Because they owe us money. So they get money and then they just give it back to us. Is that correct? Yes, if that's just a yes. I'll go into my next question. One of the problems I've had with the idea of how Future Places is governed is what I see as a lack of transparency, and the money that's been spent. Not really be able to tell whether I think it's been well spent or not, because I don't know how it's been spent. But one thing I did think that I heard recently is that the Future Places, although their registered office is here, they have an office elsewhere that they rent, and so that I believe incidentally may belong to an ex-councillor. I was just going to ask why do Future Places need to rent a separate office? And can't we give them some office space here, or can't they rent it off of us here, and that would reduce our costs?
Thank you. Yeah, this sort of echoes a question that I asked when Future Places was actually set up. And we were given some very reasonable answers at the time, to be fair. Leader.
Yes, you and me both, Councillor Aikenhead. One of the first things that we asked was, why are these people not working in council offices? And we wouldn't need to buy things off them if they were working in the council offices. There was I mean, clearly they're an arm's length company, so that's their decision around their monthly overheads, their salaries, their you know, what pot plants they want in their offices. All of that is down to them. But fundamentally, it's the taxpayer that's funding that, because their only source of income is the council, i.e. the council taxpayer. We did ask the question when we when I started getting involved, about why are these people not in the office? And actually, wouldn't the trust between the members of staff from Future Places and the planners and the housing team and all of the other people that we need to work with, wouldn't that have been built by actually letting them have as much space as they needed? The costs of the rental office are really, you know, I don't know whether they're in the paper. I don't know whether that would be a confidential matter, but they are not insignificant. And you are quite correct. I was advised about 3 weeks ago. I think the word was, "Leader, are you sitting down? There's something I need to tell you." And we had just discovered that a former councillor, Drew Mellor, had his company had purchased the building in which the Future Places are working. Therefore, the taxpayer is now paying Councillor Mellor's company, or ex-Councillor Mellor's company, for the rent. And shockingly, the date during which he became the company director for that building was while he was still a serving councillor, which yes, we're legally councillors until the 7th, and if it was the day after the election that he became the director, I suspect he didn't buy it on eBay that day in a 24-hour auction. I expect it was purchased over many months, with that work starting whilst he was not only councillor but potentially even the leader of the council. We don't know that. We do know what day he became the director, and I am beyond angry at the reputational damage that we have people being basically funded to sit in offices when we have empty office space here. Now, before we knew about this, we were told that the landlord required a new lease to be signed for another period of time, and had to be given 6 months notice. During a meeting, we asked for that payment to be made straight away and immediate notice given, because we did not feel that we should continue with them in separate offices, and we would like them to give their 6 months notice straight away, and to ask their landlord if they were able to fill those offices, whether a refund for any unused time was could be done. I don't know the exact dates, but I recall that at the next meeting several weeks later, that notice had not yet been given. So really frustrating for us, because we can't control that. They signed that lease. But you're right, Councillor Aikenhead. I don't believe that this company should ever have been outside of here. We have perfectly good offices, in the same way as PHP was within Beach House, which was a council office. It's not right, and I think there needs to be some learning from this, that if we have any other companies that have expensive costs, we should be looking to minimise them for the taxpayer at all times.
And can I just ask a supplementary question to that? Are we doing anything about the fact I hadn't realised that this was something that had happened when Councillor Mellor was on the council, are we taking any action about that? Surely that sort of thing's not acceptable.
Chief Exec. Thanks, Joe. Just to confirm, we are reviewing the circumstances and the dates. To be really clear, a councillor is a councillor. Well, this year we're councillors until the 8th of May. Just to be accurate, neither the 7th nor the 9th, but the 8th is the date at the end of which people stop becoming a councillor. We are reviewing whether that's a disclosable pecuniary interest or not, and whether there's any action that we need to take through Standards Committee or any other mechanism. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Chief Exec. Well, I would say, members, that, you know, whilst this news would easily sort of start to absorb the conversation, we need to keep this at the strategic level, which is what this paper is aimed at, because there are some very clear options that we haven't even discussed yet. There's been no debate whatsoever about the options, which is the clear point of the paper. So we need to be careful not to start getting into the weeds of the issues, although I accept that point is very relevant and needs to be addressed. But I just make the point, let's keep it at the strategic level if we can. I think Karima, did you want to come in? I see you've turned the camera on. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it was just to provide assurance that the lease notice to terminate the lease has been given.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the warning about what some may call distraction politics. I've got 2 points. The first is just about urging caution around some of the dialogue that we heard a little bit earlier on. I thought we were all very clear at the beginning that this was about looking forward and the new administration's options for how they're going to take regeneration forward in the future. And we also heard a lot of positives from the new administration around both the performance of future places and the individuals. And I worry that some of the dialogue has erred slightly into professional criticism, particularly, and you know my views on this, Chair. The Future Places team have been banned from attending this meeting and therefore being able to give their side of the argument on a number of these issues. And when we've heard, for instance, around the criticism of Future Places in not supplying information or not being open or having a very distinct relationship from the council, what I would say as a former cabinet member is that is not what I recognise whatsoever. I never had a situation as when we were running the administration of having any difficulty finding out information from Future Places about what they were thinking, where they were going. And actually, if to be honest, they were actually very open and conciliatory in trying to get our further direction on some of the projects that we were working with. And I challenged that at some points, actually, because the commissioning model that we set Future Places up was for them to give their professional advice. And I've said to them a few times, actually, I'm not a professional. Nobody in the council is a regeneration professional, so don't defer too much to the council. You know, we set the question at the beginning. You need to come forward with the answer. But that notwithstanding, I do not recognise the difficulty in getting information or relationships that I'm hearing, and I do think it's unfortunate that we can't hear the other side of the story. But I'll park that point for the time being. What I do want to,
I'd just like to come back on that, Councillor Broadhead. Nobody has banned anybody from this meeting. It was a request made by yourself. There was representation for Future Places, and you asked specifically for 2 individuals. My decision, and it was my decision, was that it would be appropriate for the chair of the board to attend and represent Future Places, which is quite the appropriate. I also said that, you know, the support that the chair of the board wishes to bring with her is exactly up to her too, not me. So the offer was there. Nobody is bound. I need to make that perfectly clear. Now, what we do have is a difference of opinion here. What we don't want to do is get into a shouting match. You contend that the points made in terms of access to information were not as portrayed, but clearly there's a difference. But again, this is history. And now we need to think about those options and moving forward. So if we could just sort of let's bring it up a little bit and start thinking about those options. And you've already raised some very good points, which I will comment on later on. But if you want to carry on.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I do agree, and I do accept your decision on that, which would have been perfectly reasonable if we weren't hearing things that it would have been useful to have heard directly from those that were involved. I want to talk about best value. Future Places was referenced in the recent assurance review from government by Leslie Seary, and the words that she used were actually very careful. It talked about concerns had been raised around possible issues with governance. There was no direct criticism from Leslie Seary herself, but a recognition that there was, some dissent or some differences of opinion. And she was also very clear in her recommendations that we should get an external independent review of Future Places, which is something that I've been calling for some time, because it would put to bed some of the disagreements that we've heard. We also have had from government a best value notice, which is not a statutory responsibility. It is an informal process, but it does put the onus on the council to demonstrate best value in all of its decisions going forward. And going back to my original point around the principle and having no costed business plan around bringing the model in-house, and we've heard earlier on that we do not know the full costs of this decision. It's estimated to be up to £7 million of revenue, as it says in the paper. We've heard assurances that we'll try and get that down, and we would have preferred to have had that before we made a decision. I do worry that in virtue of the best value notice that we've got, and actually in virtue of the fact that government themselves have recommended that before any major decisions are taken, we actually have a long, hard look about whether this decision is being rushed. Because I personally think £7 million of taxpayers' money to make a very quick decision. We're at scrutiny today, it's going to Cabinet next week, it's going to full council the week after, when we do not know the full costs, could go against the best value notice that we've had, and actually does go against the government's own recommendation that we should have an external look and not just make quick and hard decisions, particularly when they're of such a big financial impact.
Okay, thank you. So the point you've raised is it being rushed? Are we rushing this without a business plan for the internal option? Should we be pausing a bit more? Leader.
Yeah, just to cover a couple of things. I can't seem to win, can I? I'm either, dithering or acting too quickly. And frankly, I'd really rather act swiftly, decisively, and assertively over something that we have concluded with the help and support of Karima and the other non-exec directors is the right thing in the best interest of our residents. In terms of the concerns around governance, the concerns around governance were very clearly referring to the period of time prior to the involvement of Lord Kerslake, Karima, Pat and Ian, who have been absolutely fantastic over the last few months in the work that they have done with us. Lord Kerslake brought it, was it in a year? Yes, a year, but Karima stepped up after his death. Actually, I was involved in the recruitment of Lord Kerslake. All right, Phil, you can say whatever you like. I had 2 interviews with Lord Kerslake, and I was involved in proving the fact that he was your choice. I then had several meetings with him during the run up to the election when he phoned and spoke to me because he was fairly clear that you weren't going to be the leader beyond the election. And he wanted to be clear that his direction of travel was going to be aligned with what he believed to be the new council. Immediately afterwards, the appointment of the non-exec directors, the officer decision record to confirm Karima and Ian was on the 18th of January 2023. So they've been in place for much less time. The criticism of the governance was that Councillor Broadhead was the chair of this organisation. So of course he knew what was going on, because there was a lot of communication going on between the people who were involved in that board. Councillor Broadhead, Councillor Mellor and the directors, the executive directors of the company. So that governance and that report from Leslie from DLUC was actually taking place at the very, very beginning of this year, before Karima and Pat and Ian were properly installed in their position. And it's been very clear from that work that she did at the tail end of her governance review that she had recognised a change, and that actually the council was going in a better direction, and that that Future Places was going in a better direction. There was no recommendation to do an external review of BCP Future Places. The request was that there is a clear business plan for the future, and that was carried out. It was around about this time, it was late 2023, that she'd asked for that to be done. So again, let's be clear about what was in that assurance review. Of course, we need to give best value, but to go back to what I was saying before, continuing with this organisation as it was, not viable. Absolutely not viable with what we'd asked them to do. And in terms of are we rushing this, we have to get things in the right order. So one of the things that has frustrated the staff more than anything else is the fact that we can't tell them that this decision has been made, because this decision has not been made. This decision has to go through a democratic process. So therefore we can't know the unknowns until we make a decision to wrap things up. So that is the inevitability of democratic decision making. And we found that really difficult to explain to the staff on Monday. The reason that this appears to be rushed, with the greatest of respect, is because we didn't actually have a scrutiny process that would have facilitated this to come to scrutiny until I spoke to the chair a few weeks ago, when we realised this was coming, and said, please, could you do a special scrutiny? And that was agreed. We have now got pre-decision scrutiny in place. It is normal for us to have scrutiny just before cabinet. So I think the suggestion that it's rushed between scrutiny at cabinet and full council is inaccurate. It is the normal process. What has been brought forward is an additional council meeting on the 5th of October, so that this doesn't sit around for 6 weeks with people picking over the bones of it in public, and so we can actually make some progress and start getting those details moved forward and give everybody the surety that they really need.
Thank you, Leader. Sorry, Karima, did you want to come in?
Yes, happy
Yeah,
to come in.
also,
Thank you. And of course, I cannot comment on the position before I joined the board, nor can I comment on the council's own governance processes. But I think what it is fair to say is that the Future Places board has been, was fully engaged with the review that the council has undertaken over the past few months of the project program and the business plan. And we do understand the need, to respond to the very different economic and financial position that the council finds itself in, which is, a very different place to where it was 2 years ago when the entity was set up. So I just thought I'd make those points, and I don't know whether Pat would have anything else to add on this particular point.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we are in a different place and a different time, aren't we? And lots of very good work has been done, but sustaining that level of investment for the council, and in so doing having the sufficient turnover for Future Places would appear to be very difficult. I think this is probably the right route to go down to keep the key projects moving forward.
Thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Chapman-Long.
Yeah, a couple of things. Really good to hear from the Board of Future Places. Really positive comments, I think. So I just want to clarify something on the cost. So that we don't know how much it's going to cost exactly, because we can't get access to the information, because we don't own them yet. Well, they haven't brought them back in yet. Is that correct?
Largely correct, but we have now got access to those reports, had it for about the last 2 weeks, so we're working through that, but we haven't finished that work yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think members, everyone's had a bit of a fair crack of the whip now, and now it's my turn. So, yeah, I've not written anything down. I just take absorbing this fascinating conversation. But when Future Places, the concept of Future Places was put out there, I was very much in favour of it because I was personally not content with the BDC model, and I felt that this particular model gave the council total control over its regeneration efforts. And, you know, we were promised as a tech company, you know, we would have access to all the information, they would be accountable, we could scrutinise, etc., etc. And to be fair, I've also been party to witness to some of their work too, and some of it's been exceptionally good. And in fact, there were some issues, of course. Some of them revolved around the risk to the council because under the model, the Future Places were being paid for its outline business case and then its final business case, and the costs were quite high. But of course, that didn't guarantee that the developments would go ahead. All it was developing, all it was assuring is that you're going to get a good professional business case. But there's still no assurance, of course, that the development would go ahead because who was going to pay for it? Because at the end of the day, it was the council who was going to have to pay for that. And actually reflected in that was the ambition of the council, which resulted in the borrowing limits being doubled almost to 1.3 billion. And the reason it was doubled to that level was to accommodate the developments that the council's ambition wanted to do through Future Places. You know, it was good, you know, and we were moving, but of course, times have changed. Things have changed enormously. We have our transformation program. There's huge pressures on the council's finances. The inflation's rate has gone through the roof. The building costs have gone through. Everything's got, you know, the costs are huge. And the council undoubtedly is in a difficult financial position. And they're obviously, you know, the regeneration company like Future Places is expensive because you're getting a top quality company with really professional staff that can bring regeneration forward in a nationally recognised way. And I have to say, there was some very good work set out. And I think the report reflects that. But of course, as we've moved through and things have become more difficult, there were some tensions developing within the company as well. And you can see that reflected in this report. Notably, the commissioning process, where the task placed on Future Places really expanded exponentially. And I used to ask, how on earth can this company manage all of these projects and be really good at all of them at the same time? And of course, what they were doing was bringing in other consultants in order to staff that work. So I think that there were some real issues about the control of the tasking on the company, and it resulted in spreading their expertise too thinly. And of course, that was also driving up the cost. And as we've seen, the cost, the drawdown on the loan was significant. So it did start to have some, but I've no doubt that those problems would have been overcome progressively. They would have been overcome. But of course, we now have the transformation program to fund. We've got a difficult financial position at the moment. And those are really the two main things that are driving this decision. But of course, in recognition of the need that we still need to do some regeneration. Now, I have to say that when I looked at the options, so nobody's mentioned the options other than the option one, the ones selected. I actually believe that, and I use Councillor Slade's terminology, stop, pause and reassess. Because I actually thought that option 4 was the best one. Because I think we needed to stop, pause and reassess. And the reason I say that was because if we bring the team within the control of the council to bring the cost down a bit, there is still no guarantee that we're actually going to end up with a development, because the burning question is, where does the funding come from? Where does the finance come from? Now, that was one of the hopes that we had for Future Places, that the contacts and expertise nationally with investment institutions could be brought in and be part of the journey towards a development. That bit is still actually, if we bring it in-house, that bit of the equation, I believe, is going to be missing, is compounded by the issue about interest rates in the future. You know, because we could come up with some beautiful costed business plans, I'm sure, but whether it will actually ever result in a development or not is a big, to me, it's a $64,000 question. So even if we bring it in house, are we, even though it might be cheaper, maybe it's actually going to be a waste of money because we won't be able to carry out the development. Of course, yes, there is a value in work in progress, of course. You could table it, it's got a value. The value, there's a very interesting conversation about how you're going to value the work that's already been done. Work in progress. It's a black art, and I'm sure Adam Richards is probably quite an expert at it, being an accountant. But I've experienced this myself. How do you possibly really value work in progress? So I was actually thinking about tabling a move to go for option 4, but I'm holding back, and the reason I'm not going to do it is because of the need to progress, in particular Holes Bay. Now the report does reflect very clearly the need for the council to move towards affordable housing and social housing, and what I was hoping was that our in-house housing development team could progress that without necessarily using you know, an organisation like Future Places. And I do think there's some dangers in jumping in, and I agree with Councillor Broadhead to a point that, you know, just creating another organisation within, it's going to be expensive in itself. But of course, also, it was the reason why Future Places was created in the first place, and the BDC, because the councils had great difficulty with actually coming forward with developments and getting them built out. So that's why they were created, to bring in those really professional people. But as I say, things have changed, and the issue is now about affordability. But I'm not going to make the moves that I was thinking of, and the reason is what we really do need to progress Holes Bay and other key sites like that. Not quite sure what the better model for doing that is, but so I'm going to support or endorse. I would move to, actually, I'm going to make a move now to endorse the recommendations that are in this paper, and I'm going to ask members to vote on it. But before I do that, I can see that the leader is fingers hovering over the microphone button. Thank you.
Chair, I'm very grateful to you for that, and I think it is worth actually just putting that thought out there, in that if we were to progress with option 4, we would not be able to deliver more, because the housing delivery team has a lot on its plate right now. It is working incredibly hard on the projects it's already got to deliver. You know, there are some fabulous projects that it is doing, and that's been complicated. I mean, Templeman House that lost its developer because they went bust, and having to go back to the beginning on that one. The brilliant you know, family hostel that's almost completed in Herbert Avenue. The Carter's Quay project that they're having to do a lot of work around because of the failure of the developer there, and all the smaller projects that they've been working on to deliver social and affordable housing. You know, that team would have to be significantly boosted if it was to do something else. So I just want to take issue with one thing that you said about, you know, losing Future Places and replacing it with another organisation. There's no intention to replace it with another organisation. This is to bring in-house. So it is to boost the regeneration team within the council as the regeneration, you know, officers working in this building as part of this council. So there is no intention to create a new organisation. In terms of what's different now, we have to recognise that some of the work that has been done by Future Places, particularly on Holes Bay, has moved Holes Bay on exponentially. You know, a lot of the work that has been done behind the scenes is now incredibly valuable. You know, some of that contamination work, some of that ecological work brings us to a point where we can get towards delivery. There are elements that could be delivered, potentially tiny bits that the in-house team could do. But we do need to invest in regeneration if we're going to bring it forwards. What's different now is that there was no capacity, but also no evidence base 4 years ago or 6 years ago. That wasn't there. So I do think that we can be confident of delivery on those key sites. I think if we were to completely close down the regeneration function of this council and move only to what's within the housing revenue account, we would stifle the ability to even provide social housing, because some of those developers we'll work with on these sites won't be our housing delivery team, but they will be delivering affordable housing, and that's the bit that I think really matters for people.
Thank you, Lydia. Just to come back on it, if I may. When I talked about different organisation, I was talking about the new directorate within the council being formed. That's what I meant. And the motion that I was considering was that we actually divert our current resources to assist in accelerating the development of social and affordable housing, rather than say, actually, we're going to stop everything and release those staff that are currently, part of that. No, that wouldn't be the intention. It would be to redirect them to support that end, without necessarily creating a new directorate. That was because, new directorate, there's costs and all the rest of it. So I mindful of the costs, of course. Now we've got a couple of people want to speak, and once we've taken Councillor Tarling and Councillor Rice. Well, okay, but I did warn you just now you would all have to go, and I was going to wind up, and we do need to. Well, just a minute, Councillor Trent, I'm speaking. Thank you. And we are going to discuss the pool and the Christchurch Civic Centres. Okay, so we haven't come to the end of it. Okay. So Councillor Tarling.
Thank you. Is there something extra? Councillor Broadhead has just given me a nudge, as he's put it, to draw to attention something I actually thought was confidential. But I was actually interviewed by Future Places prior to becoming a councillor. He said that I was not successful for the job. Actually, I decided not to progress it further because of a certain I wasn't interested necessarily in the role. I was approached by a recruiter working on behalf of Future Places because of what I do. And as I mentioned previously, I worked in a company offering something very similar. On that basis, I won't be voting any further, but I had made it clear to certainly my leader that I had been interviewed when I became councillor, but I didn't see it as a pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tarling.
I would say I am concerned that something that is confidential has been disclosed in an open meeting, which I am slightly concerned about. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware that anybody else has disclosed that other than yourself, Councillor Tarling.
No, Councillor Broadhead has just messaged me to say that he wanted to bring it to my attention before anybody else pointed out something which an interview which is confidential.
Okay, Councillor Rice, thank you.
Can I just check that Appendix 1, that's not confidential, is it? Appendix 1 isn't, I can speak about Appendix 1. It's not confidential. Nothing in there is confidential. That's fine. Yeah. It's only, what did you say?
Appendix 1 is the Future Places business plan projects. That's not confidential.
Yeah, you.
That's fine. So yes, I wanted to speak before you put forward your motion, because I have just realised that I am quite concerned about some of the projects that are proposed to continue. So I'm just trying to scroll back to the correct place. So the recommendation is agrees the outcome. So recommendation A agrees the outcome of Future Places business plan projects review as set in table 12.1. So I just wanted more confirmation about what that is that we are suggesting that we agree to, because there are mentions of green car parks. So I also want clarification on what it is meant by a green car park.
If that was the detail of one of the projects.
I think Councillor Rice is referring to the different things. The Appendix 1 is what Future Places were doing. 12.1 in the paper are the cases that we are looking at in terms of the actual projects. So there's no intention to take forward Appendix 1. Appendix 1 is what Future Places had on their list. So we're certainly not taking forward green
Last year.
in 21, 2022, yeah.
So that's useful. So 12.1 references and Future Places business plan for 4A and B, Chapel Lane. And then it says next steps, continue under development delivery model to be agreed by cabinet. And that is one of the green car parks. So that suggests that it is going to be continued, I thought.
So I think that's a lack of clarity in drafting. I think the idea there is to look at what that might become. Sorry, through. That was to look at what that might become, bring that back to cabinet, not to bring forward the green car parks concept that was in the appendix in the original business plans for Future Places. So I think we probably haven't been sufficiently clear in that one.
Okay, and the same relates to the Christchurch one as well.
So, yeah, Councillor Trent.
Well, if we're talking about specific sites separately, that's all well and good. I think I support the principle of option 1, but it's the detail under H that I was not prepared to rubber stamp without having further discussion.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to draw this debate to a close, I would move that we support recommendations for supporting option 1, and we'll come back to the last two, to H and G, in a moment. So, is there any dissent from that proposal? Yes, Councillor.
I think, Chairman,
Yeah,
I
please.
think Chairman, if I may, can we have you've proposed supporting A to F, not with G and H being left separate. We need a seconder for that first, and then we can discuss it.
Okay, yeah. Does anyone wish to second that? Vice Chair will second that. Just the first part. Is sorry?
You referenced G. G is part of the recommendations around the future of Future Places. It's only H that is the reference to civic offices.
Sorry, I haven't got the paper in front of me.
Yeah, so, Chairman, you're proposing you indicate your support for recommendations A to G.
Yes.
And Councillor Moore has seconded that.
All those in favour? You indicate. Yes, you may, Councillor.
Stickler for just say, Chair, I fully appreciate the intention. I'll be abstaining. The reason I'll be abstaining is that, as I've said earlier on, I think it's absolutely within the gift of the new administration to design the council in their own image, and I'm not in the habit as in opposition to opposing for opposition's sake. It's certainly not my style. However, I do think I haven't still had a satisfactory answer as to how spending up to £7 million of council taxpayers' money at a very difficult time when we're supposed to be developing, demonstrating best value, is the best use at this time. I don't think the position has been made very clear. I do accept your point that momentum is important, but there's been a lot of talk tonight around the need to continue delivery of social housing and housing. That's absolutely important, but that is not regeneration. We have another part of the council, the CNAS programme, which, you know, our administration created. I started that from scratch, which now has, by last count, I think 1,400 homes in the pipeline across all tenures. Regeneration and the council's housing ambitions are two very different things. So I don't think taking time to make sure we're generating best value is the same as stopping our housing ambitions. So I will be abstaining.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Councillor Tarling.
Thank you. Just so for the avoidance that there's absolutely no, I have no other interest in it. I've declared certainly one interest, and also has just been raised. I had been interviewed prior to becoming councillor by Future Places. I'm going to abstain as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tarling. All right then. Yes, Leader.
Sorry, Chair, just for the record, whilst the CHAS or CNAS programme may have been invented by Councillor Broadhead. That was just the shiny wrapper around the Council House building programme that was commenced and delivered by Councillor Kieran Wilson. When he was portfolio holder, I actually recall Councillor Bob Lawton paying tribute to the work that Councillor Wilson had done. And I do remember in the time that we were leading the council that Templeman House was also agreed as council housing. So I think we need to be very careful that while the CNAS programme might have been the pretty wrapper, the actual agreement to build council houses was not invented by that. All councils over time have worked really hard to deliver on that, except the extended the number, but it didn't invent it.
Okay, members, to the vote now, please.
Chairman, I'm sorry, I do need to interrupt you again. Councillor Tarling,
Yes.
to abstain is taking part in the vote. So not to take part in the vote or to abstain.
Not voting, I think, is the expression.
Thank you. Thank you for the point of clarity. I will not take part in the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anton. Okay, members, those for endorsing those recommendations in favour?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Those against? Abstentions? Thank you.
2.
Thank you. Okay, let's just move on then to the last recommendation, H.
Thank you. And first of all, apologies for being late, but it was gone 5 o'clock that I left Bridport, so it would have been, and I had a colleague to drop off at a railway station. I've got a question, first of all, because I think it informs what I was going to say. Who owns, because I'm told it could be us, the site of the court in Poole? The magistrates court in Poole.
Is the court, can I, oh sorry, Mr. Richards.
Thank you. I'm responding as the corporate property officer, but I'm also responding as the Section 151 officer for Poole previously, because while I was Section 151 officer for Poole, there was an arrangement because Poole used to own it, but then there was some kind of national direction that moved that asset into the ownership of a government at the time, and therefore we do not currently own that bit of the site.
Thank you, because and I don't, as far as I know, it's not confidential, but Dorset magistrates are looking at their property portfolio, and that particular court building has been identified as not up to current standards. And I think that informs what I might suggest as the way forward on the Poole Civic Centre site, because it is potentially a bigger site to redevelop than it is at the moment. And my main priority personally is I want to see the preserved part of it, the listed part of it, which is basically the front end, what would have been the vertical slice. I would personally want to see that left out of any big disposal, and I think we actually need to look at other potential partners for a vertical slice. As I say, the Future Places shared a lot of their thoughts with myself and a couple of other members. I was mayor and they shared it with the sheriff and the lead member for regeneration at the time. And they had some quite comprehensive ideas involving a large part of the site, with one little corner of the site cut out. As I say, I think that there's a possible discussion on that remaining corner of the site, but I do think that we need to look at that whole site and look at protecting what has got listing. And I'll listen to the way the debate goes, but I might sort of make a proposal depending on what comes out of it on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Trent. I mean, you do raise an interesting point, but we do need to bear in mind, of course, that this will be a council decision. So it will go through cabinet and it will have to go through full council. But interesting, the full council has already made a decision on the Paul Civic Centre, which has not yet been rescinded, I point out. The vertical slice is still the approved decision of the council. So you might like to just dwell on that.
What's that?
The vertical slice was part of the building that would be retained for the coroner's court and also for the civic, the use of the civic offices for the mayor, etc. You know, that was put on hold. In fact, work even started on it. That work was then put on hold because the plans were changing, and then we had a proposal for the civic centre from Future Places, and we had the outline business case presented, and that's when things started to change. Councillor Moore,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, can we have some clarification from officers exactly what the situation is? Because I thought that the previous plans from the Unity office, when we're going to have the coroners and the mayoralty and all the vertical slice there, I thought that that ship had sailed, to be absolutely honest. And I know it went through council and I know it was approved, but I thought then those plans were replaced by the previous administration, who put forward the idea for the combined residential and hotel scheme. So I'd like to know exactly where we are, because there is a great grade 2 listed frontage to the building that goes way back to what was described as the vertical slice. If the decision is still there, how do we progress this?
Probably the same way the other proposal was, that if the council makes a decision on an alternative proposal, it supersedes the one that was made earlier. It's as simple as that, I would imagine. But is there anybody who would like to comment on that?
Chair, I'm not too sure how much clarity I can add in other than to say, with regards to this recommendation, the proposal is to sell the site, which includes the civic centre, the multi-storey car park and the civic centre annex. So therefore any previous proposals falls if council makes that decision.
Councillor Goodall?
Yeah, I just wondered, I think it was raised earlier, but the situation with long leases, there were properties in Poole that I believe had been built on the basis or leased on the basis of 999-year leases. My question is therefore, could the property be sold on a long lease as opposed to freehold?
Councillor Slade?
Yeah, just to say, absolutely, it could be. I think that the purpose of this request and looking at the wording of the request, it could we could very much look at the opportunity for cabinet with your recommendation or without to vary the wording of this, because it's a council decision from cabinet in terms of the process. What we need to do is to start a process, a decision-making process that says these are surplus to requirements and we need to move them on, because if we don't move them on, we're not going to ever generate the capital receipt that we need to deliver the transformation process. And actually we don't know yet what we don't have access to all the information that was forthcoming with Future Places in terms of who would genuinely be interested in purchasing this site. We do know that there was some soft market testing done but having spoken to some of the people who were soft market tested, they said, well, yeah, we always reply to this sort of thing. Doesn't mean we're actually going to stump up the money to go and buy that. So we need a decision to progress. Because of the value of the decision, it has to go through council. But I would be very comfortable if the wording of the recommendation was further developed so that there was protections around that. But in terms of the detail of what the options are, absolutely long leases as an alternative to a freehold sale would be completely up there in terms of getting the best value for the council and the right result for people at Poole.
Yeah, thank you, leader. I couldn't agree more on this. I mean, what we're really doing is establishing or scrutinising the principle of disposal. That's really what it's about, not the detail within that principle.
Yeah.
It is, and if somebody wants to make it some alternative words, that's fine. But I personally am happy with that because I know it's going to go through all the various processes anyway, as we did the last time. To be honest, Sue, sorry, did you want to come in?
Yes. Yes, I think I'm really pleased to hear what the leader was saying there, because I actually think that it's worded very alarmingly in here. It's important that we don't make decisions to dispose of assets in a way that looks rushed to members of the public. And although, because quite a lot of the people on the council are in Bournemouth, they may not understand the depth of feeling there is in Poole and Christchurch for the civic centres, and how, in fact, out of all the assets that we might dispose of, these are probably the two most controversial. And so it is, I believe, a really bad idea for us to make a decision to do it on as a small item at the end of a report on something else. And what this really needs, I think that what we should be making as a recommendation from this committee is that a decision this big merits its own item. It should be a separate item on the agenda. It should have its own report giving all the options and giving the pros and cons of those options, and thinking through how everything should, so that we can have all of the information. For instance, there is nothing in this report that tells us how much it would cost to keep how much we're saving through not keeping it, what sort of repair the building's in, any reasons why we may need to dispose of it. And it's almost that we're thinking of it as an afterthought. So I think that it's important that also, when we're thinking about disposing of these sites, that we're still thinking about the kind of things that we want to be there, and making sure as we do our local plan that we are getting the timing right, so that we've got the information in the local plan, so that the person that we sell it to has got proper guidelines as to the kind of things we want. A lot of people have suggested that it would be good to have some sort of community facility on the site of the Poole civic office, and that it's through planning policy, I think, that maybe we could achieve that if we get the timing right. So I think, rather than rushing through a decision to approve the disposal now, what we really ought to be saying is that we start the process to investigate what we can do with these former civic offices, including considering disposal, and also to can I just clarify, am I allowed to talk about the outlined future places plan, or is that part of exempt? It's okay, I won't talk about it if it's exempt.
We've already moved on from that.
No, for the future plan for this site.
It is exempt.
That's in the public note.
The OBC itself was published as part of the previous.
Okay, that's fine.
So
I just wanted to make the small point that it does say in that outline plan that if we were to dispose of the site with planning permission, we would get a lot more money for it. So that's certainly perhaps an option, even if it's not planning permission for a hotel, but maybe for something else. It's something that we at least ought to consider as an option. And even if it's a no, it ought to be in the report why it's a no. So it's fine. Maybe it's not something we can do at all, but just I do believe that with something this big, it's really important that we consider all the options.
Thank you, Sue. Leader.
Yeah, let's just come back on that very last point in terms of the pros and cons of taking sites through to a planning permission before selling it. One of my favourite phrases is, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Yes, you'd make more money from it, but the time and cost involved with getting it to a stage of a planning consent could and probably would be years. The purpose of selling the assets is to generate funds for the transformation programme and to allow the council to be able to get through these difficult times and to deliver. We could spend years and years and years arguing with ourselves between the council and the local planning authority to get something through planning consent, then selling it to somebody who would then potentially not put in their own planning consent for something slightly different, which would then have to be considered. It isn't necessarily a very sensible way forward when actually we've been in this merry-go-round for quite a few years already. I do think there is some merit in what you say, though, Councillor Aikenhead, about withdrawing this element of the paper, so that the options can have proper scrutiny, because the capacity to so the main reason why this it has been linked in with the paper on future places is because what we need to be able to do is to not say we're going to close down future places, bring it in house. What are you going to do? What? We don't know yet. We are very clear that these two sites don't have a future as a council delivered facility. Their futures will be in delivery outside of the council. And so I think the intention of bringing it within this was to say, well, not only are we making this decision, but here's the first couple of pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. I think it's probably fair to say that the energy and the time that's had to be taken to get the rest of the paper right, and you would not believe the number of drafts that this paper has been through to get it to this point. It's probably the most I've ever seen. It possibly meant that actually the focus has been on A to G, and actually the other issue from my perspective is I was very uncomfortable with the idea of taking this as a cabinet decision, and actually it was important to me that the decision around future places went to full council. I think if I'm really honest, I assumed that more of those decisions that we've just that you've just recommended that we progress with would have been cabinet decisions, and therefore it's full council decisions. The idea that the only bit that goes to council is this decision that's really in its infancy and needs the fleshing out, and that fleshing out happens at a later date, fills me with a bit of concern too. So I'm very comfortable with the idea in consultation with Graham and Jess about actually would it benefit everybody to be able to own this decision more if we were to defer it, so that we all understand what the options, particularly around leasehold versus freehold, and how we can ensure the protection of the slice that everybody was committed to can be rolled into a paper. So I would be very happy with that recommendation from this committee to cabinet to defer this item, but I don't want to be kicking it into the long grass. It needs to be deferred for a period that is not, delayed and delayed and delayed. We need to move this forward quickly because we need to make a sale in the next financial year. Otherwise, we won't be able to deliver the transformation.
Yeah, thank you. I will come to you in a minute, Councillor Warner. Yeah, and in fact, I did ask the leader that question directly when I saw the item on there, because in itself, you're absolutely right. It could generate a paper in its own right, but of course, there is this pressing need to fund the transformation programme, and I'm sure that Mr. Richards is bursting at the seams to explain that to us. Thank you.
Chair, about what I'm about to say, I don't want to pass or be seen as any comment on the conversation that's already happened. Just to highlight that as part of that confidential paper, the last bit of that is the background papers that were taken to full council in March, which is the full business cases presented by Future Places. And as we've discussed earlier tonight, they are based on Treasury principles around looking at the options and evaluating each one of those options. So a lot of the information I think that's been reflected upon, I would assume, is included within those two documents that council's already, had the opportunity to consider as part of that process. I would also emphasise the point the leader made with regards to actually every day there is a cost of holding those properties, and every single day it is costing the council taxpayers money if we prevaricate on a decision. And just to highlight the point the leader made with regards to the receipts from those properties is, if you like, quite critical with regards to the funding of the transformation programme in 24-25 and avoiding us having to sell income generating assets.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Look, I agree with nearly everything that's been said. I think Councillor Aikenhead makes some really good points. The recommendation as it stands is very stark. For those of us that have lived through the last few years, we know how emotive the topic of Poole Civic Centre is, and to a lesser extent Christchurch Civic Centre, but mainly Poole Civic Centre, in particular around the assurance or otherwise of some type of ongoing mayoral function. And to simply say that we agree to dispose it doesn't adequately resolve a lot of those. So I think it's I would absolutely agree with the leader's point that it would probably benefit from having a little bit more time just to look at the options around this, not least as well because a member of the public, Mr. McKinstry, earlier on raised a very good point around whether the council has looked into leasing the building out. We keep talking about long leasehold versus freehold. That's very different from leasing the building out. Leasing the building out could be a tenant that goes into it. Generally, when we're talking about long leasehold, it's council maintaining the freehold and selling off a long leasehold. So we haven't adequately addressed that. Of course, that ties into the chief exec's point around the transformation programme, and I think we need a bit more work on that as well, because my last understanding was that the gap that we had for capital receipts was closing, and it's actually whether these are completely necessary or whether there are other options of that. So on the basis of the leader's recommendation, I'm quite happy to put forward a recommendation that the Overview and Scrutiny panel recommend to defer this option for further work.
Mr. Richards.
Yeah, just to pick up the point that Councillor Broadhead has just highlighted with regards to the capital receipts and the funding and transformation programme, the situation is that the gap has reduced, i.e. we don't at this moment in time foresee that we have to sell any more assets in 23-24, but there's still a gap in 24-25, and 23-24 is dependent on a number of assumptions around the funding in the transformation programme when it would be incurred. So there is still an element of risk within that.
So Councillor Broadhead, you've made a proposal that this is deferred. Yeah, have you got a seconder for that?
Following the lead of the leader. Yeah.
Councillor Moore's going to second that. Okay, we have any more debate? We've had quite a debate on that now. Any more debate on that? Okay, can we just, for the record, can we have the words to Mr. Hampton just to make sure that it's reflected?
Something along the lines of that the Evidence Committee support deferral of item H for further work, so that all councillors can be able to understand what the options are. For example, particularly around leasehold and freehold issues, and councillors can be able to address the issues around the vertical slice, but recognising within that there's the need to progress the issue as quickly as possible.
I'm happy with that. Second that. Sorry, sorry, Councillor Moore, you second that. Okay, members, I think we'll go to the vote on that. All those in favour of that motion?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Is that everyone? No abstentions, I'll just check.
This is, I think it's appropriate to the meeting, but I had if that decision is carried through by cabinet, I'd understood that the extra full council meeting on the 5th of October had been put in specifically to facilitate this decision. So does that mean that some of us, for instance, who may be at party conference having to travel an awful long way back, might not have to do so if that went through?
Can I just make the point, because you have raised it, that the reason that the meeting was set on that date was to ensure that we didn't have to call you back from actual party conference because it was going to be on the Tuesday, and we wouldn't have wanted you to feel that you couldn't partake because you'd have been at your party conference. So I have just asked. I know, I'm all right, Jack. But I have just I have asked Graham whether we could all be released from another evening, not just us, but also our officers who would be being asked to be giving up an extra evening.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Chief Exec, you wanted to come in.
So yes, I'm going to have to take advice from Susan Zeiss on this, but my understanding is because the council has now passed a resolution to call a meeting, and because we adopted the constitutional change that allows us to change dates of meetings. I'm not sure that we have. You did. Sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting. So if you have agreed that we will look at the wording of that to check whether or not we can cancel the meeting if we don't need it, and what the process is. But the council has now got that done dry. So we will reflect on this and come back to you as soon as we can.
Okay. Rumour has it, yeah, it was agreed. So, okay. I think members, I think I'm just going to wrap this whole thing up now. I think we've come to the end of the agenda. You know, we've had a very thorough debate, particularly on the first part. You know, some of the issues that we've covered, you know, staff in particular, social and affordable housing, reasons why in-house is better. Sorry. So, Jack, you want to come in?
Sorry, Chairman, just before you wrap up, I just wanted to make a comment in thanking the non-executive directors of Future Places, because they have really stepped, emphasised the phrase non-executive. They have been holding board meetings every week. They have been in conversation almost every day. We have called on them far more than their contractual requirements, or probably their moral requirements as well. I just wanted to thank the non-executive members, directors in particular, and particularly Kareem and Pat, obviously, for being with us this evening. I think that is worth saying because it has been extremely helpful to the council and I believe to Future Places as well.
Thank you, Chief Executive. And I'm sure we all echo those sentiments. And thank you, Karima, from me. So where was I?
Thank you for the invitation to join this evening. It's very kind.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just summing up, and everybody's a bit tired, so I'm not going to go over all the points that we've raised. But it's been a thorough debate. I think it's been well worthwhile. And with that, I think I'll close the meeting. Thank you.